Well, I am delighted to be here. Of course I am. I truly am.
Happy to have you.
I think,
Roll with the punches.
yeah, I think you're going to like this. I think you're going to like this one. Our sermon this morning was originally written and presented by Reverend Sarah Youk. She was a longtime minister at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Vero Beach, Florida. She began this sermon in 2018 with a parable, which was written by Rabbi Edwin Friedman, and it's called The Bridge. There was a man who had given much thought to what he wanted from life. He had experienced many moods and trials. He had experimented with different ways of living, and he had had his share of both success and failure. At last, he began to see clearly where he wanted to go. Diligently, he searched for the right opportunity. Sometimes he came close, only to be pushed away. Often he applied all his strength, all his imagination, only to find the path hopelessly blocked. And then at last it came. But the opportunity would not wait. It would be made available only for a short time. If it were seen that he was not committed, the opportunity would not come again. Eager to arrive, he started on his journey. With each step, he wanted to move faster. With each thought about his goal, his heart beat quicker. With each vision of what lay ahead, he found renewed vigor. Strength that had left him since his early youth returned, and desires, all kinds of desires, reawakened from their long dormant positions. Hurrying along, he came upon a bridge that crossed through the middle of a town. It had been built high above a river in order to protect it from the floods of spring. He started across. Then he noticed someone coming from the opposite direction. As they moved closer, it seemed as though the other were coming to greet him. He could see clearly, however, that he did not know this other, who was dressed similarly, except for something tied around his waist. When they were within hailing distance, he could see that what the other had about his waist was a rope. It was wrapped around him many times, and probably, if extended, would reach a length of 30 feet. The other began to uncurl the rope, and just as they were coming close, the stranger said, "Pardon me, would you be so kind as to hold the end for a moment?" Now, surprised by this politely phrased but curious request, he agreed without a thought, reached out, and took it. "Thank you," said the other, who then added, "Now, 2 hands now, and remember, hold tight," and he jumped off the bridge. Quickly, the free-falling body hurdled the distance of the rope's length, and from the bridge, the man abruptly felt the pull. Instinctively, he held tight and was almost dragged over the side. He managed to brace himself against the edge, however, and after having caught his breath, looked down at the other, dangling close to oblivion. "What are you trying to do?" he said. "Just hold tight," said the other. Well, this is ridiculous, the man thought, and began trying to haul the other one in. He couldn't get the leverage, though, because it was as though the weight of the other person and the length of the rope had been carefully calculated in advance so that together they created a counterweight just beyond his strength to bring the other back to safety. "Why did you do this?" the man called out. "Remember," he said, "if you let go, I will be lost." "But I cannot pull you up." "I am your responsibility." "Well, I didn't ask for it." "If you let go, I am lost." He began to look around for help, but there was no one. How long would he have to wait? Why did this have to happen now, just when he was on the verge of true success? He examined the side, looking for a place to tie the rope, some protrusion perhaps, maybe a hole in the boards, but the railing was unusually uniform in shape. There were no spaces between the boards. There was no way to get rid of this newfound responsibility, this burden, even temporarily. "What do you want?" he said to the other hanging fellow. "Just your help." "Well, how can I help? I cannot pull you in. There's no place to tie the rope so that I can go and find someone to help me help you." "I know that. Just hang on. That will be enough. Tie the rope around your waist. It'll be easier." And fearing that his arms could not hold out much longer, he tied the rope around his waist. "Why did you do this?" he said. "Don't you see what you've done? What possible purpose could you have in mind?" "Just remember, my life is in your hands." Well, what should he do? If I let go, all my life I will know that I let this other die. If I stay, I risk losing my momentum toward my own long sought after salvation. Either way, this will haunt me forever. With ironic humor, he thought to die himself instantly, jump off the bridge while still holding on. That'll teach you. But he wanted to live and live life fully. What a choice I have to make. How shall I ever decide? As time went by, still no one came. The critical moment of decision was drawing near. To show his commitment to his own goals, he would have to continue on his journey now. It was almost already too late to arrive in time. But what a terrible choice to have to make. A new thought occurred to him. Now, while he could not pull this other up solely by his own efforts, if the other would shorten the rope from his end by curling it around his waist again and again, together they could do it. Actually, the other could do it by himself, so long as he, standing on the bridge, kept it still and steady. "Now listen," he shouted down, "I think I know how to save you." And he explained his plan. But the other wasn't interested. "You mean you won't help? But I told you I cannot pull you up myself, and I don't think I can hang on much longer." "You must try. If you fail, I die." The point of decision arrived. What should he do? My life or this other's? And then a new idea. A revelation. So new, in fact, that it seemed heretical. So alien was it to his traditional way of thinking. "I want you to listen carefully," he said, "because I mean what I am about to say. I will not accept the position of choice for your life, only for my own. The position of choice for your own life, I hereby give back to you." "What do you mean?" "I mean simply it's up to you. You decide which way this ends. I will become the counterweight. You do the pulling. Bring yourself up. I'll even tug a little from here." And he began unwinding the rope around his waist and braced himself anew against the side. "You cannot mean what you say," he shrieked. "You would not be so selfish. I am your responsibility. What could be so important that you would let someone die? Do not do this to me." He waited a moment. There was no change in the tension of the rope. "I accept your choice," he said, and freed his hands. Reverend Youk begins. There is a story that is told about 3 brick masons working on the same project. When the first man was asked what he was doing, he answered gruffly, without raising his eyes from his work, "I'm laying bricks." The second man replied, "I'm building a wall." But the third man said enthusiastically and with obvious pride, I'm building a cathedral. Just about everything I want to say today is contained in that story. So if you tune out, maybe you've already tuned out, and you don't hear anything else I say, take that story with you and apply it to your life. Take it into every activity of your week. When you do something, think about it. Are you laying bricks? Are you building a wall? Or are you building a cathedral? The difference will not be in what you are doing, but in how you feel about yourself when you are doing it. 3 brick masons, same task. One of them was following his bliss. Now, bliss is not a word I tend to use in my everyday vocabulary. I think of it as a word that gets used in corny romantic songs because it rhymes with kiss. But now you got a sermon called Follow Your Bliss because that wise and wonderful anthropologist, Joseph Campbell, used that phrase over and over to describe spiritual balance. If you follow your bliss, said Campbell, you put yourself on a kind of a track that's been there all the while, waiting for you, and the life that you ought to be living is the life you are living. Wherever you are, if you are following your bliss, you are enjoying that refreshment, that life within you all the time. Joseph Campbell talked about living out of the hub of the wheel instead of the rim. Anne Morrow Lindbergh similarly wrote, I want a central core to my life that will enable me to carry out my obligations and activities as well as I can. I want, in fact, to borrow from the language of the saints, to live in grace as much of the time as possible. I'm not using this term in a strictly theological sense. By grace, I mean an inner harmony, essentially spiritual, which can be translated into outward harmony. I am seeking perhaps what Socrates asked for when he said, may the outward and inward person be at one. I would like to achieve a state of inner spiritual grace from which I could function and give as I was meant to. Unquote. Call it the spiritual core. Call it creative energy. Call it the hub. Call it the inner light. Call it humanity. May the outward and inward person be at one. To follow your grace, to follow your bliss, is to live in grace from the hub, from the place that builds a cathedral. Campbell was not encouraging self-indulgence, though. He was talking about listening for what calls you to know who you are and who you are meant to become. To follow your bliss, then, is to be centered. He said, there is something inside you that knows when you're in the center, that knows when you're on the beam or off the beam. Most of us are living on the rim most of our lives. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn puts it through the voice of a prisoner, people waste themselves in senseless thrashing around for the sake of a handful of goods and die without realizing their spiritual wealth. Spiritual wealth. What does that mean to you? Some of you may be here because you want to attend better to your spirit. You want to feel that sense of well-being or purpose that comes with being centered in something larger than yourself. Perhaps you're conscious of the fragility of life, and you want to feel connected with a more eternal purpose. Perhaps you're feeling isolated, and you need to experience yourself in the context of a community where people care about one another and work together for love, justice, and peace in the world. As Rabbi Friedman illustrates in his story about the man getting waylaid while crossing the bridge, things happen in our lives that pull us off course. Instead of feeling our spiritual wealth, we feel trapped or stuck, out of control. I recall a statement a friend of mine made several years ago. He said, "Sometimes I feel like my life is living me instead of me living my life." And he was a very successful businessman with a wonderful family. He was a generous community volunteer. He loved to garden and play golf, and he was in good health. To anyone who might observe his life from the outside, he seemed to have it all together. But his success had become his boss, and it was not his bliss. He had a big home with a big mortgage, kids in expensive schools. He felt trapped in a lifestyle choice that required a large income. He felt he did not have any choices left to make. He was living a good life, but he was living on the rim. Following your bliss means feeling in balance. It means being in alignment with your highest ideals and your deepest yearnings. If you are theistic, you might even speak of feeling there's a divine purpose at the center of your life. Different things pull us off balance. Think of the man walking across the bridge. Have you ever felt like you were handed that rope? Maybe you lost your job and you got stuck doing something that you did not enjoy. Maybe you got pregnant when you were not ready for parenthood. Maybe you got into a relationship where you were living to please others and draining yourself. Maybe you chose to help someone and they took advantage of your kindness or betrayed you. Maybe you became dependent on someone else's financial support. Maybe you or someone you love became addicted to alcohol or gambling or something else addictive. Or maybe you were just trying to be a good person and do the right thing, but you were using yourself up, trying to be the person you thought you should be instead of the person you are. I could go on for several minutes listing all the things each of us may have dangling at the end of that rope, including things like our own guilt or fear. I'll let you think about that for yourselves as you consider what might be distracting you or pulling you off the beam. Now, I want to explore now what might help you come back to the center, to the place where you feel most alive, where you feel engaged with others, where you feel fully present in this moment and you know you are part of a larger energy and purpose. Reverend Youk writes, "My chief ministry, now that I am retired, is as a spiritual director." That's a misnomer because I don't direct anyone. I spend most of my sessions with people helping them discern their calling in life and center themselves spiritually, usually with a regular spiritual practice that fits their particular personality type. Someone asked me recently what I do for spiritual practice. I told her I've tried many things: prayer, memorizing scripture or poetry, sitting meditation, walking meditation, drumming, chanting, body movement. Each has served at different stages of my life to call me back over and over from the rim to the center. Now, it's morning quiet time, walking, engaging with the natural world. When we had children in the house, it was always harder to make time for meditation. But I think that was when I had the most discipline about my practice because it was when I needed it the most. Parenting teenagers especially seemed to pull me off the beam. In more recent years, I have been drawn to the Buddhist approach described by Thich Nhat Hanh as mindfulness. He writes, "Mindfulness is simply to be there, alive in the present moment, body and mind united. It is the capacity of being there in order to live deeply every moment of your life." According to the teaching of the Buddha, life is available only in the present moment. If you are distracted, If your mind is not there with your body, then you miss your appointment with life. Your appointment with life. Like the man walking across the bridge. Like him, you have an appointment with life. Your appointment with life. Now, in this moment, in this place, with these people, to follow your bliss is to be present for your appointment with life. Sometimes a regular spiritual practice helps you stay in tune with your own purpose. You miss your appointment when you're anxious or you're afraid. You miss it when you are worried. You miss it when you're critical or judgmental. You miss it when you're stuck in negative feelings or grumpiness. So your practice may also be something that brings you back over and over again to a calm, mindful presence. In a little book called Let Your Life Speak, author Parker Palmer writes, "There are moments when it is clear, if I have eyes to see, that the life I am living is not the same as the life that wants to live in me." Before you tell your life what you intend to do with it, Parker writes, listen to what it intends to do with you. Before you tell your life what truths and values you have decided to live up to, let your life tell you what truths you embody, what values you represent. Parker speaks of a voice inside that calls you to be the person you were born to be. So I ask, what are you called to be and do with your one wild and precious life? It's not a question about your career or your profession or your volunteer activities. It's not a question about what you wish you could do if you were younger or smarter or more physically able. It's a question about the life that wants to live in you right now. 3 parents, all doing the same thing, were asked what they were doing. The first one answered, "I'm changing the baby's diapers." Second one answered, "I'm raising my child." Third one said, "I'm building the future of our world." 3 church members involved in a volunteer activity. What are they doing? First one answered, "I'm working on a quilt for the auction." Second one said, "I'm helping us make the budget this year so we can keep our doors open on Sunday." And the third one answered, "I'm serving the ideals of my religious faith." I remember a man in my congregation in Rockville, Maryland, named Tillman. Tillman was a young man who worked very hard at his job and was proud to be able to support his family well. He literally worked his heart out, I guess, and it gave up on him. So he had a heart transplant. He lived for another 5 years. He was no longer able to maintain a career. However, he who had been the one to go off and bring home the bacon became the one to stay home and cook the bacon. It was not an easy adjustment for him to switch from breadwinner to bread maker. But it was an adjustment that gave him the opportunity to reflect upon how much he had needed his work to express his sense of self-worth. In those 5 years, he learned what it meant to express his identity in what he did rather than receive his identity from what he did. With a profound sense of the preciousness of each day, he lived with gratitude for what he was given. He told me before he died that those 5 years were a gift from God. They gave him relationship with his children. Tillman's loss of a heart enabled him to learn about the heart that mattered. He got better acquainted, not just with his children, but also with the light within himself. It was beautiful to see. Unfortunately, it often takes a major life event or a tragedy to shake many of us out of the place where we see and nurture our own inner light, where we express our identity in what we do rather than receive it from what we do. There's a story about an 18th century Hasidic rabbi named Zosya. Just before his death, Josiah speculated that when he finally arrived before the heavenly tribunal, they would not judge him by saying, "Why were you not Moses?" or "Why were you not Elijah?" They would simply ask him, "Why were you not Josiah?" "To thine own self be true," wrote Shakespeare, albeit the words did come from that scoundrel Polonius. To thine own self be true. And it must follow as the night, the day, that thou canst not then be false to any man or woman or child or beast or tree or flower or mountain or meadow or sea or star. So, that's my sermon for today. To thine own self be true. Follow your bliss. Simple, huh? But it will occupy you for at least one lifetime. Reverend Sarah Youk.